I like this part right here. Come on. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Fixing the on. Till victory is won. Yeah, we add a little something to it. Just to encourage you. We're gonna take you to church later. Let's go! We'll keep marching right until the victory is won. To all my brothers out there. Hold your head up, brothers, till the victory is won. To all my sisters in the struggle. Keep believing, sisters, till the victory is won. Till that day! Till that day comes. Hey! Let us march on to victory! Till victory is won. Is won!
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the 42nd Annual Martin Luther King Virtual Luncheon. My name is Jaden Morgan, and I serve on the Board of Directors as a student board member for the African American Community Services Agency, AACSA. And currently, I'm a sophomore at Stanford University studying economics. Our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the African American Community Service Agency, AACSA, occupies the land of the Muwekma Ohlone people. We honor the Ohlone people, past and present, and the land itself. We also acknowledge the extraction of brilliance and life for labor forced upon our people of African descent for more than 400 years. Let this acknowledgement be a reminder of our continuous efforts to recognize and honor our Native American and African American ancestry. I'm excited to be here alongside Board Secretary Christina Lewis. Today, we're here to celebrate the 93rd birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and to honor our awardees for their outstanding commitment to serving the community. Like many of us, 2022 has been a transitional year for AACSA. We have worked hard to consistently adjust and adapt our processes, operations, and programming to better engage in providing needed resources to the community throughout this pandemic. After being tested and tried in 2021, I'm happy to say that we are even more devoted to our mission. This year's event includes an inspirational fireside chat with Honorable Judge Ladores Cordell, retired, and Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you, Jaden. My name is Christina Lewis, and it is my absolute honor to welcome you all here today. We are so glad to have you with us as we celebrate the life, the legacy, and the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We would like to thank each of our sponsors, vendors, and elected officials for supporting today's event. We would especially like to thank all amazing volunteers and staff who made today's program possible. As you enjoy this year's virtual luncheon, we hope each of you takes time to reflect on the greatness that lies within all of us. Now, we know the pandemic has impacted all of our lives, and we here at the AACSA are pressing on. We are here to support you. We are being very intentional with the information we provide related to COVID-19. We are also intentional about our support. So, the AACSA has partnered with COVID-19 Black, Kaiser Permanente, El Camino Health, California Life Sciences, the City of San Jose, and the County of Santa Clara to provide masks, hand sanitizer, gloves, and rapid kits to protect you, to protect us and the entire community. Also, if you need a ride to get your vaccine, or even if you desire free therapy, please contact us here at the AACSA. We are here for you. And with that, I'll turn it over to our MC for today's program, Mr. Marcus Washington, anchor for NBC News Bay Area.
Had to unmute myself. I want to say thank you to Jaden as well as Christina for opening this amazing ceremony. It is truly an honor to be back again with the African American Community Service Agency's MLK Luncheon. It is always great. I hate that we can't be in the same room, but of course we know we have to do what's best for our community to keep us safe so we can continue to thrive as we've been doing. So I want to start out with a couple of reminders for you this afternoon. Everyone who is attending, I want you to be able to navigate your way through today's program. So we know today is about uplifting the life, legacy, and dream of Dr. King, but this is also a time for us to continue our community and actually work together and talk a little bit about each other and, exchange information. So what you can do, I want you to utilize that opportunity we have to introduce yourself. So what you can do is drop your name in the chat that you see down here. It says chat if you're on the Zoom. So I want you to be able to do that for us. And you can also make sure you say who you are. And if you're being a part of another organization or representing an elected official, you can put all that information in our chat so people can know who you are and that you're here. Additionally, throughout the program, our speakers will have a short time and they will have short biographies posted in the chat. So if you're wondering, like, who is that? I want to know a little bit more about them. That will be located in the chat as well. And you can also use that chat to share information and contact information for your respective organizations. So I want you to please select the all panelist attendees option that's in the chat box if you would like all the attendees to view your information. Additionally, you can submit questions and we can use those during the question and answer section of the program. In the Q&A section of the box, this is the bottom section of the Zoom window. And of course, we'll be scanning those comments sections anytime for those questions. We have a group of people closely watching that, so we'll make sure we get to your questions. We also want to highlight our local businesses and vendors at the close of the program. So make sure you stick around for that because, if you've been here before, they have some great things and you definitely want to take advantage of that. Also, we do have an ongoing auction, so I want you to be sure to purchase your tickets for that. Those prizes include, these are good prizes now. Those prizes include 4 round-trip tickets from Alaska Airlines. You can win a staycation or a great getaway at a Marriott or Hilton. There are 2 individual Warriors game experience tickets. Those are great. Now, the funds from the auction will help utilize and support the programs and services the African American Community Service Agency is putting on for the community. We know how important these organizations, we know how important the services that they provide are for the community. So we want to continue to keep those programs going. So make sure you donate, donate, donate. Also, on behalf of the entire Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Luncheon Committee and the entire team at the African American Community Service Agency, I want to thank this year's 42nd annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Luncheon 2022 virtual MLK corporate sponsors. That's Google, Alaska Airline, Knight Foundation, Niantic Labs, and we also want to take the opportunity to thank our dream virtual sponsors. Those include HP, First Five Santa Clara County, San Jose Evergreen Community College, County of Santa Clara, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, City of San Jose, and the Golden State Warriors. I want to thank you all for the virtual table, general sponsors, and vendors that you all can support around 1:30 timeframe. So just be mindful of that. At 1:30, you can be able to support all the vendors that we have. It's really important to support those vendors because during the pandemic, we all know how businesses have been hit hard. So we want to continue to help locally owned businesses right here in our community. We want to thank all those donors and those who are participating in today's event, which may be matched by our companies for ongoing support of the African American Community Service Agency. So we want to thank them so much for all that they do. Next, I'd like to introduce to you our lead in prayer this afternoon by Eli Pfeiffer.
Eli's having technical difficulties. You can move forward and then we'll let you know when he arrives.
Okay, we'll get to Eli in just a moment. So we're going to move on to something that I'm excited about. Our next guest is a legal commentator and police reform advocate who is a frequent commentator on news outlets, including NPR, CNN, and MSNBC. A graduate of Stanford Law School, she became the first African-American woman jurist in Northern California, a position she held from 1982 to 2001. Now, prior to her time on the bench, she was the first lawyer to open up private practice in East Palo Alto, California. It's a low-income community of color, and was an associate dean at Stanford Law School, where she implemented a highly successful minority admissions program. Now, following her retirement on the bench, she was a vice provost at Stanford University, and in 2010 was appointed the independent police auditor for the city of San Jose. She has received numerous awards, including Silicon Valley NAACP's William E.B. Du Bois Award, the Iola Williams Public Service Award, the National Council of Negro Women's Public Service Award, the Social Justice Award from Legal Advocates for Children and Youth, and the Rose Bird Memorial Award for the California Women Lawyers. Judge Cordell founded the African American Donor Task Force. This is to increase the Black participation in the National Bone Marrow Registry. She is the co-founder of the African American Composer Initiative and CA Parks for All. Everyone, please welcome the Honorable Judge LaDoris Hazard Cordell.
Thank you so much, Marcus.
Thank you. Well, George Cordell, I just want to say, first of all, you know a person is a great person when you hear about them before you ever meet them. And I remember hearing about you in the newsroom and just how great you were within the community. So I want to say it's an honor to finally be able to have a conversation with you to talk a little bit more about you and so other people can know all the great things that you've done.
Well, thank you so much. I do want to note that I've seen all of these messages coming in the chat, just people introducing themselves. So many of them I know and haven't seen for a long, long time. So I'm greatly appreciative that so many people are participating in today's program. I'm delighted that you're the MC.
Oh, well, thank you. I want to start by talking about your journey in becoming an attorney. Talk to me about what was it that pushed you to go to Stanford Law School and earn your Juris Doctorate?
I'm a child, Marcus, of our public schools. I was raised in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia, and my two sisters and I attended majority white public schools. My parents, Clara and Lewis Hazard, made it clear to the three of us that we were going to go to college, and the three of us did. I attended Antioch College in Ohio and initially majored in Espanol. Yo puedo hablar español. And I lived for several months in Guanajuato, Mexico. When I returned to the United States, I decided to change my major to drama and speech. And I did that primarily because I ran into saw so much racism in Mexico, where the indigenous, darker skinned people were the lowest rung and treated just poorly. And it just reminded me so much of how Black folks are treated and people of color are treated here in this country. So I came back and decided to change my major to drama and speech. And that was the best preparation for a career as a litigator and eventually as a judge. And why? Because just as a stage performer has to persuade her audience, a litigator has to persuade her audience, which is a jury. And then as a judge, I was the producer director of all things in my courtroom.
I love that, because I think that shows a lot of people that, while, your ultimate goal may be here, there's so many different avenues that you could take to get there that ultimately prepare you for that actual ultimate goal that you have.
Right, exactly.
I love that. I want to talk to you about another big milestone, at least I think in my eyes, the assistant dean at Stanford Law School, a place where you earned your degree, and attorney through your own private practice, which, so many people I'm sure would love to do, but don't have that opportunity. Talk to me about what made you decide to go through those avenues, because they could be trying, I would imagine.
Absolutely. So when I graduated from Stanford Law School, this was in the early or mid 70s, I had this big afro and wasn't about to change any of that. And of course, what happened was that I was unable to get a job at any of the corporate law firms here in the Bay Area. They just were not hiring people of color, and especially women with big afros. So I had to make a way where there was no way, which was starting a law practice in East Palo Alto right out of law school. When I was a lawyer, there was not the proliferation of TV judges that we see today. I never saw judges of color when I practiced law, let alone a Black judge. And I saw only a handful of female judges. So judging was the furthest thing from my mind. And that changed when I got a phone call from a stranger. A stranger was a judge named Mark Thomas, who was a white guy on the bench in Santa Clara County, who invited me to participate in a judge pro tem program. So in the first chapter of the book that I've just been published called Her Honor, I have a chapter called Bitten by the Judge Bug, where I write about what happened when Judge Mark Thomas called me. The pro tem program is basically gives a chance for lawyers to sit as a judge for a day over small claims cases. And that's like the Judge Judy cases where there are no lawyers, it's just people suing each other. So he put me on the list, and eventually I got a phone call to go be a judge pro tem. And what happened when I presided over that one case was what set me on the journey to becoming a judge. So I don't want to say any more other than as a teaser that's in the first chapter of the book. That case was all about Black women and their hair.
Oh, okay.
That's a good teaser.
And the book's on Amazon. I already looked. So
Yes, correct. This is what the book looks like. It's called Her Honor.
And I love that, like in the top, you can see it says, "My life on the bench, what works, what's broken, and how to change that, and how to change it." Talk to me about that. I mean, your time on the bench, you've seen a lot. You've presided over many cases. What, without giving away what's in the book, but what works and what doesn't, and what can we do as just citizens of this community to change things that are broken?
So first, let me just say that there are many things that are problematic in our legal system, and many things that are broken. That being said, I also believe in our legal system because it is based upon wonderful principles, the best principles you can think of, the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, due process, the right against self-incrimination, the right to remain silent, the right to a speedy jury trial. The problem is in the implementation. Those principles were devised by white propertied men who did not intend that they apply to women, to poor people of any color, and especially to people of color. So our job is to make this legal system's principles apply to everyone. We're not there yet, which is one reason when I just look at the criminal system, I don't call it a criminal justice system. I call it a criminal legal system because we are not at the point where we have justice. So when you ask about what is to be done, there's the next to last chapter in the book called The Fix, where I make 10 recommendations that readers can get behind to change our legal system for the better. All of them are important. And I hope that when people read the book, they'll maybe latch on to one of those recommendations that makes them feel that they could do something to make our system more just. I don't know if you want me to give you an example of something, but if not, that's okay.
Well, no, I kind of want to talk about that. Go with that. I have another question, but I want you to talk about that in an example, because I think that kind of helps people put this all together, because they're wanting to know, how can I'm not an attorney, I'm not a judge. How can I make a difference?
Well, two things. One big subject is jury trials. I presided over hundreds of jury trials. And in Santa Clara County, for example, I saw very few African Americans and Latinos on juries. And that's really a part of the problem. So two things I talk about in the book. One is doing something about how Black people, brown people are excluded from juries. And I'll just talk about the criminal legal system. And that's usually prosecutors who are using peremptory challenges. These are challenges where they don't have to give a reason, and each side gets a certain number of challenges. And so what happens sometimes, and actually frequently, is that prosecutors, and I'm not just talking about this county, this is just nationwide, where there will be, let's say three Black people are just excused for no cause, peremptory challenges by, let's say, the prosecutor. The law says that a defense attorney can then say, contest it and say, wait a minute, race can never be a motive for dismissing a juror. Then they have to turn to the trial court judge to then ask the question. All the law requires is for the prosecutor to give a race-neutral explanation for why that person was excused. Come up with something. The person stared at me the wrong way. And all of this is code for stereotypes of people of color, of Black people. But routinely, judges have just rubber stamped these race-neutral explanations, many of which are just ridiculous. So I recommend that has to change, that the judges have to dig deep and be proactive. Another is that juror compensation. Juries matter. In my view, they keep integrity in the legal system. But how much do jurors get paid for the weeks, the days, sometimes months that they sit on the jury? In California, $15 a day, not counting the first day. So that message to me says jurors don't matter. And this is really the case around the country. So I recommend in The Fix what we need to do to increase juror compensation and what we people can do. And I'll leave it for folks to read when they get to that chapter.
So I want to ask you about your strength. What kept pushing you? Because you are the first and some of your achievements in your life. So talk to me about the strength that you had to push through and be the first, and sometimes the only.
Well, certainly there was pressure, and being the first of anything in any context brings with it pressure not to fail and pressure to succeed. And I experienced pressure from the good old boys in the legal system, many of them prosecutors and judges who did not want me there on the bench. Their feeling was that I was going to be this out of control liberal judge who would release everybody in the streets and just not fit in. Their hope was that I would fail, or that was their expectation. So then there was pressure, a different pressure from communities of color. Their expectation from the Black community, from the brown community, is that I would succeed. And their fear was that if I didn't, there wouldn't be another judge of color on the bench for many, many years. So basically, Marcus, I could not mess up. I had to succeed, and failure just was not an option.
How do you deal with that pressure? Because I feel that sometimes in some cases. How do you deal with it?
Oh, I deal with it simply by remembering from looking at history and remembering whose shoulders we stand on. And I look at the struggle that my maternal great-grandmother and great-grandmothers persisted in and succeeded in, and that because they were the enslaved. So I look at that, and so I feel pressure. Really? Seriously? I'm going to complain about that when those folks struggled so hard to get us where we are today. We have a long way to go because you don't measure progress by how far you've come. You measure progress by how far you have yet to go. So we have a way to go, but at the same time, there's just, acceding to the pressure we feel is just an excuse. And I believe that as a tribute to those who've come before us, we always have to push forward, you in your field and those of us in the legal field.
I certainly think that, because I use my grandfather, for example, who was born, in segregated Jim Crow South, and just what he was able to achieve. And then just the sacrifices of my mother. I said, I can't afford to let them down, because what they had to go through, I don't have to go through many a times. So,
and you haven't let them down. I mean, look what you've done. Look, I mean, here you are. So.
And I want to tell people who are listening, if you don't have that person in your life, you can look to people like Judge Cordell. You can look at others, that have come before us that are, while you may not know personally, they are your cheerleaders. So I just wanted to let the people know that I really do appreciate what you've done. I want to talk about that because we talk about, the youth, they are the vision. They are our future. They are the tomorrow. What do you say to those high school seniors who are just starting to think about college or already being, accepted, or even those first year college students who are saying, this is getting tough. How do I continue? Sure. How do you encourage them and for them to give back?
Well, my advice to young people who are interested in, say, careers in the law is to go for it. The law was my passion because it was a way for me to give back. My parents instilled in my sisters and me that we stand on the shoulders of so many who came before us and who sacrificed so much to gain the rights that we now have. Yes, the legal system has so many broken parts, but consider that the system, basically has the potential to be fair to all of us. So I think that we need people, young people, to think about careers in the law. The law offers careers as law professors, policymakers, litigators, politicians, authors. If you want to make a difference right now to young people, participate in moot court competitions that happen at the high schools. Go sit in a courtroom and observe. Seek out attorneys and judges to be your mentors. And the first thing you should do, the very first thing, read my book.
It's a good blueprint. Talk to me about, I know a lot of people, when they think about judges and laws, they get confused from the state level and federal level. Can you talk to us about the difference and
Sure.
the importance of each?
Sure, and I'm glad you bring it up because often it's confused. Federal court judges are nominated by senators and appointed by the President of the United States. They serve lifetime appointments. They can't be recalled or removed. They don't ever have to stand for election. And they preside over federal cases that are filed out of the office of the U.S. Attorney Generals. So in my book, I wrote solely about state trial court judges, not the appellate judges, because one, I was one of them, and because our trial court judges, the state judges, are the first Black-robed people we all encounter when we enter a courtroom. There are about 30,000 state trial court judges who preside over a wide variety of cases that impact every one of us. Divorces, child custody, juvenile and adult crimes, dependency court, where judges decide the fates of children who've been neglected and abused, mental health court, where state trial court judges decide if people in locked psychiatric facilities can be released back to the community, adoptions, name changes, probate court, where family members fight over the spoils of the deceased, evictions, weddings, and a whole lot more. So unlike federal judges, state court judges do not have lifetime tenure. Most are initially appointed by state governors for a certain number of years, after which they have to stand for re-election if they want to stay in the jobs, and they can be challenged by lawyers who want to take their places. So in the chapter in the book I call Judges for Sale, I write about judicial elections of state court judges, something that I strongly oppose because elections have been taken over by moneyed special interests. And as a result, elections of judges, I believe, are really destroying judicial independence. And in the chapter, The Fix, I give a recommendation for what we should do instead of electing judges.
Love that. Can you talk a little about the difference? You're no longer sitting on the bench as a judge. Can you talk about the difference, your role there, and how you're still an advocate? You're still working. So talk to me
Right.
about kind of how is that different in your life?
People often ask me, do you miss judging? And my answer is no. I did it for nearly 20 years, and it was the best of all jobs and the worst of all jobs and everything in between. I had wonderful days where I presided over adoptions or presided over a wedding, and I had terrible days where I had to enforce laws that I didn't believe in, such as a 3 strikes law, which in California was draconian and was really responsible throughout the country, not just in California, for the mass incarceration of people of color. And it was hard. I did what I needed to do, but I write in the next third to the last chapter of the book about a case involving an African-American man that I sentenced. And I did not want to impose the sentence and agonized over it. But when you're a judge, you have to uphold all of the laws, even laws you do not like. But after I did what I did in that case, and I write about it in detail in the book, I decided that that was it. I'd had enough and I couldn't do this anymore, and that I wanted to try to change the system from the outside. So in the last chapter of the book, it's called In My End is My Beginning. And I write about what I did after I left the bench to try to, in a way, make amends, atone for the kinds of things that I had to do that I really did not want to do. So I just have this mantra that I live by, Marcus, and it's from the words of Alice Walker. And she said, activism is my rent for living on this planet. So every day I try to pay my rent, be it when I was on the bench and since. And I encourage everyone who cares about justice and fairness to every day pay your rent.
I hear your passion and your words. What do you hope your legacy is?
So when you talking about legacy, then I start, two things come to mind. Ooh, she's really old. I am, but I don't like to talk about it. And it's really, legacy for me is about, patting, in a way, patting oneself on the back. Look what I did. And that's just not who I am. So I care not about legacies or about what mine is. What I care about is that as long as I'm here, doing what I can to pay my rent every day. And that means speaking out, voting rights, doing everything that I can within, my sphere, and particularly given COVID, how restricted we are, but still continuing to speak out. One of the things I do encourage people to do, though, is, we see so many things wrong in our political system, legal system. It's easy to complain about it. I mean, the first thing is, always just register to vote and vote. But the other is to actively stop complaining and do something. And one quick example I'll give is that here in the city of Palo Alto, I just saw such dysfunction. And I particularly saw police who were repeatedly stopping young African Americans and Latinos who were coming across the freeway from East Palo Alto into Palo Alto. Very concerned about that. And so instead of whining and complaining, I decided to run for the city council. And I did run. I took no money from anyone and ran an entirely grassroots campaign and was elected to the city council. And so instead of complaining, then you're in a position to do something. And while I was there, I was able to bring the council members together sufficiently enough to have an independent police auditor for the city of Palo Alto to deal with this racial profiling that was going on in the city.
Judge Cordell, you've given some great words, some great encouragement, and I can't wait to be able to meet you in person and have a conversation. But I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and your gems with us.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you so much. And I encourage everyone to please read Her Honor and then be motivated to get out there and make things better for everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Her Honor, that is her book out right now. So make sure you get out and get it. There it is. Thanks, Judge Cordell.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank, I just love being able to talk to people with such wisdom and love for the community. So I just thank Judge Cordell for that. And look, you were here to see it. You have to show up to be able to get the information. So thank you, Judge Cordell. Right now, we would like to have for you, this is something that we want to run for you right now. It is called You So Black. This is by Teresa the The Songbird. This is courtesy of Blackbird Media Enterprises.
Black is televised and in need of drastic Black advancement. Black enhances, Black with chances, Black with privilege, Black with pride, Black on purpose on the Black hand side, Black and beautiful, Black and blessed and highly favored, praise the Lord, Black and blessed, Black and so much more, Black and nothing less, Black and educated, Black is brilliant, Black is strong, Black is resilient, Black is song, Black is infinite, like hip hop or space. Black is grace, Black is love, Black makes babies, Black babies grow up, Black is tough, Black is hard to do. Black is me, Black is you. Black is not something we get to choose, but it is something we get to cherish. It's something we get to wear and we get to rock this with honor. I'm Black like my granddaddy and my great-great-great-great-grandma. Black is that lift every voice and sing. Black is that letting your freedom ring and resound. Black is adjective, adverb, color, and noun. You so Black. Oh, you so Black. When you smile, the stars come out. Baby, you so Black. When you're born, the God come out.
Thank you for that. So I just want to give a reminder, if you have not already, now is really the perfect time to renew your membership with the African American Community Service Agency. So please visit www.sjaacsa.org/membership. This is for more information on your membership or your membership renewal. And we want to introduce you all this year to lifetime membership option. Contributions and donations, of course, can also be made on the AACSA website. And you can do that by going to sjaacsa.org/donate. Links will be dropped in the chat as well. So look, continue to donate because it is how we continue to offer the services through the center. All right, so if you didn't know, the African American Community Service Agency, founded in 1978, is one of the only community centers of its kind in Silicon Valley. And in 2021, the AACSA announced the building of a new African American Community Service Agency through the African American Cultural Center project. Now, to learn more about that project, provide your input, and see what outcomes from the stakeholders meeting, make sure you join virtually on January 26th at 7 p.m. The info, of course, in the chat as well. And you know what, as they say, dreams do come true. So thank you for all those and continue to donate. So make sure you go there and do that. So on behalf of AACSA, I want to take the opportunity to thank our media partners, NBC Bay Area, the Black Bay Area, and 102.9 KBLX. And I am reminding all about that auction. I was telling you all about that auction. A lot of great items out there that you want to make sure that you are a part of. And those include 4 round-trip Alaska airline tickets. And you know what? There's still time to put in that bid. So when it comes to your wealth and health and wellness, well, that is a pillar of the AACSA. So make sure you make those donations. And you know what? We can continue to offer those services. So I want to tell you that the Red Cross, they are facing a national blood crisis right now. So without more donors, hospitals, they really may have to take those and make those tough decisions about which patients receive those transfusions and who must wait. So you can help out no matter your blood type. All you have to do is make a donation that is critically needed right now. You can do that by visiting rcblood.org/donate. So now I would like to introduce to you Linda Alexander, president of DAWN, the Democratic Activist for Women Now, and Beverly Waithaka. She is an intern and at the African American Community Service Agency. She's also a senior at San Jose State University, a member and the president of the Eta Omega chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, and a member of the African American Community Service Agency's Leadership Academy. Bev, as well as Linda, welcome.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm going to introduce the City of San Jose Mayor and Council members that are in attendance. We have Mayor Sam Liccardo, Vice Mayor Chappie Jones, Councilmember Raul Perales, Councilmember David Cohen. I believe he has a staff here in the audience. Councilmember Magdalena Carrasco, Councilmember Deb Davis, Councilmember Maya Esparza. Her chief of staff is attending. Councilmember Sylvia Arenas, Councilmember Pam Foley, and Councilmember Matt Mahan.
And I would like to recognize those from the County of Santa Clara that are here with us today. We have Supervisor Mike Wasserman, Supervisor Cindy Chavez, Supervisor Otto Lee, Supervisor Susan Ellenberg, Supervisor Joe Simidian. And from the City of Santa Clara, we have Mayor Lisa M. Gilmore. From the City of Sunnyvale, we have Mayor Larry Klein. From the State Assembly, we have Assemblyman Ash Kara. From the California State Senate, we have Senator Dave Cortese. From the United States Senate, we have Alex Padilla. From the State of California Department of Justice, we have Attorney General Rob Bonta. And we also have the 40th Governor of the State of California, Gavin Newsom. And now some words from our partnering organizations, Alpha Phi Alpha, Comcast, Decolonization of Wealth, Governor of the State of California, Gavin Newsom, Attorney General of the State of California, Rob Bonta, Senator Alex Padilla, Service Now, and Mayor Sam Liccardo.
Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination in these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation. We've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point. We got to see it through. We need all of you.
The ultimate measure of a person, Dr. King stated, is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of challenge and controversy. Today, we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man who would stand tall in tough times. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Moral leadership doesn't require a title. Martin Luther King Jr. never held a day in office, yet he had the will to do the right thing through his moral authority, through his moral leadership. Dr. King provided a framework for how each and every one of us can shape a more equitable future. His legacy lives on, and all of those still fighting for justice today. You know, as he also said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. So today, let us honor that legacy, his legacy, through service to our communities and use our moral authority to push for more equitable city, state, nation, and world.
Good afternoon. I'm Rob Bonta, California Attorney General. It's great to join you virtually today as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you to the African American Community Service Agency for hosting this annual celebration and also for transitioning it to a virtual one. We all must do our part to reduce the spread of this virus and keep our communities safe. I'd also like to thank you for the important work you lead, supporting, empowering, and strengthening the African-American community in Santa Clara County and beyond. As your Attorney General, I join you in this work. I see my role as a people's attorney. Each day, I fight for justice for all Californians, especially those who've been wronged by others, overlooked, or taken advantage of. The last few years have affirmed what we've long known. Dr. King's fight, the fight for civil rights, the fight for justice, it marches on. We've made immeasurable progress since Dr. King marched on Washington, in Selma, and Montgomery, and spoke words that now echo through history. But this work isn't over. This pandemic has laid injustice bare. Long-standing disparities remain in our economy, in our schools, in our healthcare system, in our criminal justice system, in every aspect of life. But I know we can meet the challenges of this moment if we follow in the steps of Dr. King, if we walk together, if we take bold action together, no matter ethnicity, race, gender, or identity. As your Attorney General, I strive to advance Dr. King's work, to take action, to fight boldly, not timidly, for equality and dignity for all. From our new Racial Justice Bureau, our ongoing civil rights enforcement work, our Housing Strike Force, Environmental Justice Bureau, Healthcare Rights and Access Team, to our Community Engagement Office, CARE, which is devoted to working with and for organizations like yours. In closing, let me again thank you. Thank you for your leadership, empowering not just the African-American community, but also your neighbors of all backgrounds, Latino, Indigenous, AAPI, providing PPE, emergency food boxes, COVID-19 testing, housing resources, and so much more to those in need. Thank you. Dr. King taught us that in order to make a difference, we must come together across difference. Let's continue to do that. Let's continue to build coalitions as we are doing today and advance justice for all. Thank you for inviting me to share this space with you, and thank you for your important efforts.
Hi, I'm Senator Alex Padilla. Thank you to AACSA for inviting me to participate in the 42nd Annual MLK Luncheon. It's an honor to join you all today. Now, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man of clear moral vision and outstanding courage. He saw the promise of America's highest ideals, as well as the lasting wounds of slavery and segregation. And Dr. King often put his own body on the front lines of the fight for justice. He kindled a movement of peaceful protest, of voter registration, and legal revolution. In 1957, Dr. King said, "Our most urgent plea to the federal government is to guarantee our voting rights. Give us the ballot, and we will creatively join in the freeing of the soul of America." His leadership helped secure the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a monument to freedom and a guardian of our multiracial democracy for nearly 50 years. But in recent years, we've seen all too clearly that our progress is not permanent. And unless we defend it, the clock can and will turn back. In 2013, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. And since then, Republican legislators across the country have continued to fan racist conspiracy theories of voter fraud. State legislatures have proposed or passed laws that make it harder for eligible voters to register to vote or to cast their ballots, endangering our free and fair elections. So today, it falls on each of us to take up Dr. King's lifelong struggle. It's not enough to just celebrate the man and his legacy. We must act. The only fitting way to remember Dr. King is to rededicate ourselves to the causes of freedom and equality. We must once again work together to pass a voting rights law that secures the right to vote for every American, no matter your race, religion, ability, or gender. And when we do that, we must work together to make sure our family members, friends, neighbors, and coworkers exercise that precious right. Thank you all for joining me in that fight.
Hello, my name is Roderick Dixon, president of the San Jose Silicon Valley Alumni Chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Today, we celebrate the life and legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, a man of peace, who work to ensure justice and equity for all. It's no surprise that Dr. King was also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And although his works exemplified our motto of first of all, servants of all, we shall transcend all, the importance of those words and the message they carry are even more relevant today. This celebration is an annual reminder for each of us to continue his work. Therefore, we should all identify our areas of interest and work with organizations and those activities that help move our communities forward. The events of this past summer and the recent events in our nation's capital underscored the importance of following our protests with action and doing so with the urgency of now. Dr. King once quoted, "Life's most pressing and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" Each of us must answer that question by first identifying those opportunities, taking action, and making a difference in our communities. Thank you for your attention.
Want to help kids get their homework done? Well, an internet connection is a good start, but kids also need computers. And sometimes the hardest thing about homework is finding a place to do it. So why not hook community centers up with Wi-Fi for kids like us and all the amazing things we're going to learn?
Over the next 10 years, Comcast is committing $1 billion to reach 50 million low-income Americans with the tools and resources they need to be ready for anything.
I hope you're ready, because we are.
Hi, I'm Quincy Chapin, the Case Reparations Campaign Advisor for the Decolonizing Wealth Project. We decolonize wealth by disrupting the existing systems of moving and controlling capital by offering truth, reconciliation, and healing from the ills and trauma of colonization through education, preparative giving, and narrative change. Reparations as a pathway for racial justice and healing in America, as racial disparities from slavery with Black Americans' health with COVID to generational wealth have not been addressed to this day. And that's why we need reparations now. And we are honored that the African American Community Service Agency joined our movement of pushing America to deal with our racial trauma. And we can't wait to see how they bring that movement to San Jose. Thank you.
And now we will have Mayor Sam Liccardo for
Thank
2
you,
minutes.
Marcus.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for enabling me to share a few moments with all of you, nearly 500 of us who have joined this celebration today as we honor the great legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. As we think about Dr. King and all he means to us today, as we have been so recently reminded, we have great fights going right now in Washington, D.C. for voting rights, to restore voting rights. And of course, we cannot underestimate the importance of that battle. It was Maya Angelou who told us all, you may be pretty or plain, heavy or thin, gay or straight, poor or rich, but remember this, in every election, every voice is equally powerful. Don't underestimate your voice. Voting is the great equalizer. We have much to do, of course, here locally as well. And I want to say thank you first, the African American Community Services Agency, Milan Valentin, and all the many volunteers and staff members who work tirelessly in all the ways that you support our community, whether you're providing programs for our youth, helping our seniors, helping our unhoused neighbors. In so many ways, AACSA is there, and we encourage you to give generously to support this critically important organization, institution in our community. And I want to say we've got a lot to work on in the year ahead, particularly as we work to combat homelessness and create greater opportunities for our young people, educational, economic opportunities. And of course, we know our conversation and actions with regard to accountability in police and the city and serving its residents continues. So I look forward to continuing that work in partnership with AACSA and so many of you in the community. Thank you very much, Marcus.
Thank you, Mayor Liccardo. At this time, we would like the Executive Director of the African American Community Service Agency, Milan Valentin.
Thank you, Marcus and Mayor Sam Liccardo of the city of San Jose. Let me get my tie right. You know, grandmother always said, have your tie on right. The mayor of the city of San Jose for bringing those words. We are excited today about the Dr. Martin Luther King virtual luncheon. We made the decision to go virtually to protect all of our guests that we have missed seeing all of you in person. The last time we were all together, we were a little of 900 deep at one of the local venues, but we will be together soon. Continue to follow all COVID protocols, protecting yourself, your community, and the world that we live in. I'm excited right now to present awards to individuals that have contributed to Santa Clara County. So awardees, please get ready. I'm going to be calling your names and then we will have a screenshot. Our first awardee is Pastor Danny Sanchez. Spirit of Service for Outstanding Pastoral Service Award is an individual who provides pastoral service that evokes leadership, inspiration, and commitment to the ministries of one's community. Chandra Brooks, the Drum Major Award. The Drum Major Award recognizes individuals who exemplify leadership that promotes change in one's community. Leslie Slayton Brown, VP and Chief Diversity Officer of HP, Facing the Challenge Award. The Facing a Challenge Award is given to an advocate for the development of organizations that provide services to better our community. Dr. William Armeline, the Gene Young Award. The Gene Young Award recognizes an individual or group who is a community-based unsung hero. And last but not least, but also first, Tyler Gordon, the Champion of Change Award. The Champion of for Change Award recognizes individuals who take on challenges relating to advocacy and social or racial justice issues in their community. Can we have all of our awardees on the screen? Awardees, you can go ahead and wave at the audience before we take our screenshot. Our brother Tyler is he's traveling to New York. For those of you who know Tyler, he is well known here in San Jose, but Tyler is one of a kind artist that is a gift within a gift. And awardees, we're gonna take our quick picture, so smile. Okay, hopefully everybody got your screenshots. We have a surprise for all of our awardees. Typically, you probably would receive a regular award that you could put on your shelf and share with everyone. But we decided to invest in the arts. We decided to invest in our young artists. So you all will be receiving a Tyler Gordon portrait of yourselves. It is one of the only kind that you could ever get from somebody that has painted LeBron James, myself, Janet Jackson, Jennifer Lopez, J-Lo, you know who I'm talking about, but Tyler is gonna paint all of you. And we went a step further. We wanted to see who would paint Tyler. So we reached out to Ian Young, and Ian is going to paint Tyler and present that to him. Congratulations to all of our awardees. For although you are our selected awardees, we know that Dr. King has invested in so many people that it was so hard to choose. We know your work, and we thank you, we pray for you, and keep the dream alive. Congratulations. Now, as we move forward in the program, I would like to thank our elected officials, the Brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha, and again, Mayor Sam Liccardo, the 40th Governor of the state of California, Gavin Newsom, our elected leaders. First and foremost, we are celebrating Dr. King today, virtually. But the work that AACSA does every day is what Dr. King was talking about. Our honorees, the community, and recognizing that there is so much work that needs to be done in our community. Thank you to the entire AACSA team for putting together this program and our wonderful board members for supporting this efforts. For those of you who have been with AACSA since I became executive director, you will know when we started 11 years ago during my tenure, I had a 1.5 staff. Today, we currently have 22 staff members, 6 pillars, multiple operating programs, because Dr. King's dream lives in all of us. At this time, I want to make sure that all of our sponsors and our vendors and our souvenir booklet purchasers know that we are grateful. To our partners at Comcast, who we started a relationship with over several years ago, Thank you to Comcast for their partnership over the years to help create digital equity for youth, families, students, and older adults that they serve. With over 1,000 lift zones launched in this nation and over 100 in California, Comcast is proud to have launched a lift zone right here in AACSA and several more within the city of San Jose. We are all looking forward to the next 10 years because Comcast is building on this foundation and expanding impact through Project Up, a comprehensive initiative to advance digital equity and build a future of united possibilities, also known as Up. Backed by a $1 billion commitment to reach 50 million people, 50 million people. Project Up encompasses the programs and community partnerships across Comcast, NBC Universal, and Sky that connect people to the internet, advancement of economic mobility, and opens doors for the next generation of innovators, entrepreneurs, storytellers, and creators. Comcast, we look forward to holding you accountable for making sure that that digital divide closes. And we're appreciative at AACSA that you have always been a partner in doing that work. We want to also say thank you to ServiceNow, the Knight Foundation, San Francisco 49ers, Heising Simon Foundation, George Roberts and the Roberts Foundation, the Health Trust, HP, Google, Liberty Capital, the Sobrato Foundation, and individual donors and many more for your investment in AACSA, our AACSA Leadership Academy, Policy and Advocacy, Programs and Services. It is no wonder why AACSA is growing and expanding our footprint here in San Jose, Santa Clara County, and now in the state of California and in this nation. Continue to make your donations today, join our membership, and make sure that you give back in your community. I'm now excited to introduce Ezra Baleki, who is one of our AACSA cohort participants. Ezra?
Thank you, Mr. Valentin. Good afternoon. My name is Ezra Fleka. I'm a senior at Pioneer High School in San Jose, California, and a member of the AACSA Leadership Academy. It is my honor to be able to speak to you all today and honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm equally honored to be a part of the Leadership Academy and carry out Dr. King's call to action as a young servant leader. The AACSA Leadership Academy is a 3-day virtual leadership training weekend and a year-long cohort program to empower high school and college students to train and develop as leaders at home and in their communities, provide interactive workshops, and develop us personally and professionally, and by connecting us to a pipeline of resources and services that will bolster their education and careers once we graduate. For me personally, one-on-one college advising for Ms. Batiste, who's a part of the AACSA team, and with her help, able to get accepted to Stanford University this year. Also, I won a $2,500 scholarship to the AACSA program, and this scholarship will greatly lessen the financial burden that is on my family. Next, it's my pleasure to be able to introduce our keynote speaker for today's program. Our speaker today is the president and senior lecturer of Reapers of the Breach, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, bishop with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, visiting professor at the Union Theological Seminary, and senior fellow at Auburn Seminary. For more than a quarter century, he has pastored the Green Leaf Christian Church in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Since he began his ministry at Green Life 29 years ago, the church has sponsored efforts that have led to more than 12 million of community development. In addition to welcoming all into the body of Christ, he's the author of 4 books: We Are Called to Be a Movement, Revive Us Again, Vision and Action and Moral Organizing, the Third Reconstruction, Moral Mondays, Fusion Politics, and the Rise of the New Justice Movement, and Forward Together, a moral message for the nation. He is also an architect of the moral movement, which began with weekly Moral Mondays protests at the North Carolina General Assembly in 2013, revived under the banner of the Poor People's Campaign. In 2018, he helped relaunch the Poor People's Campaign, which was begun by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others in 1968, with an historic wave of protests in state capitals in Washington, D.C., calling for a moral agenda and moral budget. He's been arrested 17 times for nonviolent civil disobedience. Millions of Americans have participated in the Poor People's Campaign events for over the past 3 years. He also served as the president for the North Carolina NAACP, the largest state conference in the South, from 2006 to 2017, and served on the National NAACP Board of Directors from 2008 to 2020. Reverend Dr. Barber has also received the MacArthur Foundation Genius Award, the Franklin D. Roosevelt Four Freedoms Award, the Martin Luther King Jr. Center's Beloved Community Award, and the Puffin Award. It is my pleasure to introduce Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022. We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful. New unsettling force, and we are here.
We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk. And we walk and we fight.
It's time for a change. Reconstruyamos esta gran nación.
See, we are people of resilience as we fight these interlocking injustices together.
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.
I am so thankful every day for the grace of God that allows us to exist. I'm one of those recently, just in the past 2 weeks, that caught Omicron, COVID. And thank you for your prayers. Thank you for the love that you send out to so many. And this afternoon, I want to acknowledge your executive director, Milan Valentin, with the African American Community Services Agency, and just humbled to be here at this virtual luncheon as you all think about a promissory note in default: freedom, justice, and reparations. As we come here today, I want to look through the eyes of your theme, but I want to talk about why in this moment we must have a mass Poor People's Low Wage Workers Assembly moral march on Washington and to the polls, not as a day, but as a declaration and as a generationally transformative gathering, signaling a new intensification of a movement for justice. The truth, I believe, is we in the justice family in America and around the world in this moment have no option but to stand. When I look at the great teachings of Scripture, for instance, Isaiah 10, verses 1 through that says, "Woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights, make women and children their prey. And then later Isaiah 58 that says we must cry loud and spare not if we're going to see the beloved community justice come into being and be repairers of the breach. When I look at Matthew 23, when it talks about, first of all, warning those who love the tombs of the prophets, but not the prophets when they're alive. And then those who want to go through all kinds of ceremony, the politics of ceremony, religious ceremony, but then leave undone the weightier matters of love and justice, righteousness and faith. And then when I hear Ephesians 6:13 and says, and other surrounding texts, we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, against powers and principalities in high places. And therefore, we've got to put on the whole armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand. I believe this is a moment that we must have a mass Poor People's Low Wage Workers Assembly march on Washington and to the polls to have a moral reset in this nation. Not a day, but a declaration. Not a moment, not a mere celebration, but a movement. There are some prophetic insights and instructions from Dr. King. 1965, Dr. King said something we need to hear today. He said, the threat of the free exercise of the ballot by the Negro and the white masses alike is what resulted in the establishment of the segregated society. They segregated Southern money from poor whites. They segregated Southern morals from rich whites. They segregated Southern churches from Christianity. And they segregated the Negro from everything. This is what happened when the Negro and the white masses of the South threatened to unite and build a great society, a society of justice where none would prey upon the weakness of others, a society of plenty where greed and poverty would be done away with, a society of brotherhood where every man would respect the dignity and worth of the human personality. That's Dr. King at the end of the march from Selma to Montgomery. Then in his last sermon, Dr. King said, the world is all messed up. The nation is sick. Trouble is in the land. Confusion is all around. And yet in some strange way, people are responding. The masses of people are rising up, and wherever they're rising up, the cry all over the world is, we want to be free. And then he said, we've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point. So let us stand with a greater determination and let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge. Let us make America, not give in, make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation. These two prophetic utterances, one from 1965, and the other from 1968, should be heard again and again today if we are interested in what Dr. King and the devotees of the human rights, civil rights, second Reconstruction movement meant when they said them and how it informs us today. Too often, the memory of Dr. King is so mangled. He was only a Black leader. He had a dream. All the other civil rights leaders liked him. He was adored in his church denomination. None of these things are true. MLK was a prophetic human rights servant leader whose interpretation and implementation of love, truth, justice got him murdered, assassinated. But the words of his mouth and the lessons from his actions still speak to us today. For instance, that fear that he spoke of in 1965 about the new power base is really too often unsaid the issue right now in the entire battle over voting rights. You saw the other day, ahead of the Martin Luther King holiday, President Biden visited the grave of Dr. King in Atlanta. He gave on the angriest speech of his presidency, insisting that the Senate, a moral obligation, had one to protect voting rights a year after being in office. And after months of delay, separating voting rights from infrastructure and from Build Back Better, but the truth of the matter is, we should have never separated those fights. The infrastructure of our democracy and voting rights, infrastructure of our daily lives, investment in poor and low-wealth people, infrastructure, our roads, bridges, and technology really have to be fought as all as one fight. But after months of delay, Senate Leader Chuck Schumer finally moved, at least forced open debate on federal voting rights legislation this week. And now, as the nation honors Dr. King and the civil rights movement's legacy, Democrats are hoping against long odds that they can unite to push back against an assault on democracy that the president the other day, and started with the Black Caucus, calls Jim Crow 2.0. But listen, if we read Dr. King clearly, America's memory of Jim Crow has been distorted by a political culture that pays lip service to Dr. King while forgetting his vision of a democracy that works for all Americans. From the Montgomery bus boycott to the passage of the Voting Rights Act, Dr. King was a spokesperson for the Black-led freedom movement that was determined to end Jim Crow segregation in America. But Dr. King was not just a Black leader. Dr. King was also clear that Black Americans did not simply want to be integrated into a burning house. They organized with a broad and diverse coalition of Americans to challenge the basic contradictions that threaten the promise of democracy for all people. If you ever seen the picture from Selma to Montgomery, it's Black, it's white, it's Jewish, it's Christian. It's young, it's old. It's gay, it's straight. The beloved community Dr. King preached and organized toward wasn't just an America where Black, white, and brown could sit down in a restaurant together. It was the hope of a political system where the Black, white, brown, Asian, Native masses could vote together for leaders who serve the common good. We need to understand this today. Something's going on here other than just the attack on voting rights being a Black issue. Today, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce opposes, listen, both voting rights laws and living wages. Think about that. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they back Senator Christian and Sinema and Joe Manchin and McConnell and their Republican colleagues in order and in an effort to normalize the subversion of democracy and make voting rights the special interest of minority groups. And we cannot fall into that. Voting rights is not a special interest of Black people. They don't separate their money, so we surely shouldn't separate and bifurcate our movement. And our movement's demand for a democracy that works for everyday people. Voting rights are about power, the power to write policy that impacts our daily lives, specifically in particular our daily lives of poor, low-wealth people, and the power to control the purse strings of the US budget and therefore to be able to control over $21 trillion in gross domestic product. Since the Supreme Court in 2013, this fight didn't start this year. Since the Supreme Court in 2013, decision in Shelby versus Holder, the 1965 Voting Rights Act has been stripped of its power, and Congress has had 9 years. It could have fixed this. 9 years. In 2013, we saw state legislatures where majorities wanted to pass and did pass election laws in the country that changed and tried to make it more difficult for people to vote. So-called election integrity became the mantra. We got to protect the integrity of the election. That's a phrase that came when so many Black and brown and white people voted for Obama, particularly out in the South. All of a sudden, somebody said, something must be wrong. Somebody must be cheating. And so all of these tools, voter roll purges, voter ID requirement, to reduce the potential power, not just of Black folk, but the power of a multi-ethnic voting coalition. Since 2013, when I led the North Carolina NAACP in challenging the first voter suppression bill passed by a state after Shelby, the first and worst, I've called it James Crow Esquire, not Jim Crow. The data analysis and legal maneuvers are more sophisticated than Jim Crow. If they weren't, you would not have voter suppression laws being passed in Texas, where the majority of the people are people of color, the same bill being passed in Montana, where there are hardly any people of color. The goal is the same, minority rule to have an unequal society while giving lip service to democracy and to undermine the progressive power and vote in this country. The voter suppression measures that became law in 19 states last year were justified by Trump's big lie about the 2020 election. But the election integrity measures that make law are not new. Rolling back voter access, purging voter rolls, requiring strict forms of voter ID, and gerrymandering districts so that Republicans can win a majority without even getting a majority of the votes are all tools of James Crow Esquire. It is not just at Black people, it is about stopping and stifling the progressive voice and power in this country. That coalition that Dr. King talked about was possible. And if it happened, what it would do. Now, yes, to be clear, it disproportionately harms Black voters and voters of color, but their impact hurts almost all of us. When Dr. King spoke at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, that's why he noted that the Southern aristocracy knew that as long as it could pit poor white people against poor Black people with the idea of race, they could prevent people from joining together in a democratic society to reconstruct an economy that worked for everyone. And every time Black and white and others broke through those divisions and saw that they were being fleeced by the powers that be and threatened to come together, segregation, suppression, and other tactics were used to block a multiracial democracy. And today, the fear of that possibility coming together is like never before in recent history. They know what's possible, know what the demographics say, but we must know it and not make Dr. King's dream just about Black people, but about justice and love. And we must give ourselves to this moment. When I reread our Constitution of the United States, and I look at the glaring realities today of systemic racism and poverty and ecological devastation and the underfunding of education and denial of health care and the overfunding of the war economy and the false distorted morality of religious nationalism coupled with white supremacy, it is clear to me that we face right now a crisis of possibility. We face a crisis of civilization. We face a crisis of democracy and a crisis of morality that we must seek redemption from this sin, this wickedness in high places. We must believe we have in God the spiritual power to turn in new directions toward a more beloved community. In this moment, we have an obligation to bear witness to new possibilities. There must be a third Reconstruction in America. We must, in the nonviolent moral tradition, put a face on the pain that obstructionism is causing so that it's not just about numbers, but about faces. And we must shift the moral narrative. We must build power and build coalitions. And we must place before the nation, not just a critique of what's going on, but an agenda, a third Reconstruction agenda that we've actually worked on and put together in the Poor People's Campaign, a way forward that refuses to accept the lies of scarcity, that says we cannot exist with this constitutionally inconsistent, morally indefensible, politically insensitive, and economically insane politics that we are witnessing today. The nation must be saved. We are not begging the nation for anything. We're trying to save the nation. Remember, the sermon Dr. King's going to preach if he had lived that Sunday was America may very well go to hell. When COVID hit in 2020, it glaringly exposed the fissures of systemic racism and poverty in this nation. And yet, because of the outright obstructionism of McConnell's extremist Republicans in the Senate and the gradualism of so-called moderates, like Senator Manchin and Senator and some others that often don't call their name. And remember, Dr. King said that moderates are one of the greatest enemies to the civil rights movement. But because of this obstructionism, Congress has been unable to pass even a watered down responsive step of $1.9 trillion over 10 years to invest in uplifting some of the 140 million poor and low-wealth people in this nation. And these same forces refuse to pass the For the People's Act that John Lewis wrote. Now they've substituted for the Freedom to Vote Act that Manchin wrote. Think about that. We pushed aside what John Lewis put together with his dying breath. And they refused to pass the Voting Rights Act amendment. And even if it's passed now, all of the bills that were already passed in these state legislatures and gerrymandered by December 31st, they will stand and cannot be challenged because there's no grandfathering in the clause. And they hide behind a non-constitutional, historically regressive, coward filibuster, because the filibuster they're using now isn't even a real filibuster. Real filibuster, you have to defend it on the floor. And when you can no longer do it, it automatically breaks. And this is happening in this country right now, while we have 140 million poor and low wealth people. 43% of our adults are poor and low wealth. A third of the nation's poor are in the South. There are 32 million people in this country who make less than a living wage. 52% of our children are poor and low wealth. The billionaires made $2 trillion and growing in the first 20 months of COVID, while 8 million more people fell into poverty, and 61% of all people can't afford a $1,000 emergency. Thousands upon thousands died from COVID. Many didn't have to die. One study out of Columbia University said 60% of the people didn't even have to die. And in the midst of a health crisis, we've got 87 million people without health care or uninsured, and we still can't pass a bill to guarantee everybody health care. And we're the only nation of the 20th wealthiest nations in the world that does not offer some form of universal health care. 4 million families right now can get up every morning, buy unleaded gas, can't buy unleaded water. We gave $4 trillion plus to corporations in the first few months of COVID, and we can't find 1.9 trillion over 10 years, 190 billion a year. We gave corporations 1.3 trillion straight from the Treasury. It didn't even go through the Congress. And while even before COVID, 250,000 poor and low wealth people are dying a year, 700 a day. And during COVID, poor and low wage workers and people were the first to forced to go to work, the first to get infected, the first to get sick, the first to die, first to be buried. And we call them essential workers, but our policies and the policies of obstructionism treats them like they're expendable. And we got caught up in talking about whether it was $3 trillion or $4 trillion, when the real issue, is economist Joseph Stiglitz says should have been discussed, is not Manchin versus Biden or McConnell versus Biden, but them versus the 140 million poor and low wealth people. And the issue is not how much would it cost us to fix the problems, how much does it cost us not to fix them? You realize right now in this America, minimum wage is $7.25. We haven't raised it in over 12 years, and restaurant workers make only $2.15 an hour plus tips. Workers are working harder and risking their lives while corporations are making more money, but wages are not going up. And none of this is necessary. And right now, in the midst of this, an economist shared with us today 10 things. We still do not know the true public health impact of on 140 million poor of this country. We do know, number two, that poor and low income households are more vulnerable to the economic impacts of the pandemic, and that 90% of low income households spent their child tax credit on meeting basic needs. Number three, we do know the pandemic era programs that benefited the poor and low income people have ended. We do know at the same time, the nation's wealthiest people have gained trillions of dollars. We do know big business and large employers have been able to use their outside wealth to influence to push back against Build Back Better and against voting rights. They're using their wealth to undermine fixing the democracy. We do know that they've used their wealth to block mandated vaccine testing. We do know lawmakers are still accommodating corporations' needs and using the excuse of inflation to push back against additional government spending. We do know if we had passed the living wage of $15 that Dr. King called for in 1963, it would have lifted 32 million Americans out of poverty and low wealth and 43% of African Americans. We do know that economists are calling out the lies and the reasoning about inflation and saying that the fear of inflation are invalid reasons not to invest in people. We do know without the pandemic era relief program, the number of poor and low wealth people would have grown to over 150 million people, bringing us closer to 50% of the nation in poverty. And now the programs are gone. We do know, although poor and low-income people accounted for 1/3 of the voting electorate in 2020 and account for more than 40% of the population, their concerns are still not a political priority. Poor people account for over 1/3 of the electorate in 2020. In battleground state, 45% of the electorate and nearly 40% of the population. And yet you hear about middle class and the wealthy. But Dr. King said we had to talk about poverty. We do know there's been a rolling coup that has been constraining our political will since 2010. That in 2021 alone, 19 states passed more than 30 voter suppression laws and 400 were filed. And these suppression laws could potentially block 55 million, not Black people, 55 million eligible voters from using the processes to vote that they used in 2020. This is why we must have, this is why we are organizing toward June 18th and why the needs of the poor must be centered in our political priorities and in our pulpits and in the pressure that we put on politicians. Because policies, moral policies that, like Dr. King said, addresses racism and militarism and poverty, they are not only good moral policies, they are sound economic policy. There's no scarcity of resources. There's no scarcity of ideas. What there is a scarcity of moral commitment. And that's why it is the commitment of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, to go full. We announced it 2 days ago, to go full, all out in this moment of our national sickness. We see political and physical insurrection, when we see assaults on the poor, when we see widespread assaults on voting rights and democracy, when we see misinformation campaigns and billions spent to divide us, we must address this sickness. And so in this moment, we are committed to mobilizing the largest mass assembly of poor and low-wage workers in this nation's history, a mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington and to the polls on June 18, 2020. And we're calling on you to join. There must be a third Reconstruction America. There must be a declaration, not a day. We must have a campaign and a movement, not just ceremonial politics. We must, in the nonviolent moral tradition, put a face on the pain that obstructionism and trickle-down economics and neoliberalism and voter suppression is and has caused. We must fight for a shift to the moral narrative. We must build power among poor and low-wealth people and their allies who literally have the power to shift election. We must place before this nation an agenda and a way forward that refuses to accept the lies of scarcity. We must do it. We must intensify and embolden our outcry, our outreach, and our organizing. Let me tell you, the mass poor people's and low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington and to the polls is not just a day of action. No, 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 no. It's not just doing a day in honor of what Dr. King, no, 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 he wouldn't want us to do that. It is a declaration of an ongoing, committed, nonviolent, truth-telling, multiracial, interfaith moral movement. That's what it is. People are coming together from the Delta of Mississippi to the mountains of Appalachia, from California to the Carolinas, in the tens of thousands, from New York to Mississippi. We must and say, we can no longer address these issues simultaneously. Separately. We must simultaneously address systemic racism, systemic poverty, denial of health care, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. And we must do it with a continuous, long-term, in the streets, in the suites, in the voting booths, in the public pulpits, in the public discussion that brings together poor and low wealth, Blacks, whites, Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, people from every race, creed, color, region, sexuality. And our coordinating committee is now 45 states. We have religious leaders, over 2,500. We invite you to join in, 2,500 in the Prophetic Council, 200 partner organizations, economists and voting rights advocates, united by a moral fusion agenda and a long-term non-commitment to nonviolent moral activism and an analysis informed by our deepest constitutional and religious value. Dr. King knew it then, we must know it now. This is the only kind of coalition building and only kind of movement, moral movement, that can fundamentally bring into being the third Reconstruction to stop the sickness and the madness that we're seeing. And we must do this. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. We can't accept superficial political deadlines. Well, deadline is Tuesday. No, our deadline is victory. And the first victory is when we refuse to accept things as they are. John said, this is the victory, even your faith. Faith that says, I will not believe the lies. I know it doesn't have to be this way. Things can change, but they're not going to change with having one MLK gathering or one movement. No, he didn't believe that. Everything he did, campaign Montgomery, 381 days. March from Selma to Montgomery, months and over 54 miles walking. It's time for us to embolden and grab for the 21st century, a commitment to fighting and working and standing in love and nonviolence and truth and being emboldened and intensified until change comes. We got work to do. We can't be at ease in Zion. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. We cannot let an election make us depressed or one vote. Dr. King was told by Lyndon Baines Johnson, I'm not doing the Voting Rights Act, can't do it. But what Dr. King did not do is accept that, go home and say, well, we'll just wait till the next election. No, he went to Selma and joined a movement that was already there and began to push and change the climate. And then people ended up months later, after they said what they couldn't do, they ended up voting for that, which they said they wouldn't, because who was in office didn't change, but the political atmosphere changed. And we must recognize we've got to have a movement, and we're launching it with a mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly moral march on Washington and to the polls and beyond. And we've got to do this. We got great work to do until the poor are lifted, until the workers are paid, until the sick are healed and insured, until voting is not suppressed, until police killings are stopped, until land and water is not poisoned, until war is not pushed and promoted and promulgated, until humanity is respected and children are protected and civil rights and liberal labor rights and human rights are never neglected, until these things are actualized. Their absence must embolden and intensify our dissent and our agitation. Silence is not an option. Standing down is not an option. It wasn't an option for Martin, can't be an option for us. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. And if we refuse to turn back, the day will come that we will see victory. The beloved community will come into existence. And what folks said could not be done will in fact be done. Justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. God bless you.
Let's all, wherever you are, give a round of applause there for the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. Strong words, encouraging words. I love what he says. Silence is not an option. Standing down is not an option. Reverend Dr. Barber, thank you for giving us your time. Thank you for giving us those words of encouragement. We appreciate you greatly for that keynote speech. Thank you. Now, we all have an obligation to work towards positive change. So following the conclusion of this program, of course, we will be hosting a vendors spotlight. This is for all of us to stay connected with some of our local businesses. We all have to work together to uplift each other to make our community stronger. So this is a great opportunity for you to do that as well. In doing that, it also supports the African American Community Service Agency. So please do your part. All right. Well, thanks again for everyone joining us for this program, the MLK Luncheon 2022. I want to say thank you for the African American Community Service Agency for allowing me to be a part of this program yet again. And I guess I should say at this point, we'll all see you in June for Juneteenth. I can't wait for that. And now I would like to turn things over to the board chair for the African American Community Service Agency, Derek Jackson.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek Jackson, the board chair for African American Community Service Agency. And before I give my farewell, I must say, listening to Reverend Barber, I'm so inspired. We must do more. Voting is power unleashed. So on behalf of the African American Community Service Agency Board of Directors, staff volunteers, and the 42nd MLK Committee, we want to thank you for attending today's virtual luncheon. We want to thank you to the program participants, our sponsors, vendors, souvenirs, booklets, supporters. And at this time, we're also going to ask you to support our vendors, the spotlight where you can get connected with some of our local business owners. But right now, I want to turn this over to our great executive director, Milan.
Thank you, Marcus, board chair, Derek Jackson, all of our attendees, sponsors, and the local and the national community that tuned in today. We heard the words of Reverend Barber. We have also heard from retired General Doris Cordell, our AACSA Leadership Academy participants. I am inspired. We know that the work is just beginning again today, tomorrow, and forever always until justice is served. That promissory note may be in default, but we are the ones that are going to make sure that we get our reparations. I would like to introduce Stephanie Allen and Theresa Walker from the Vendors Committee. Please make sure that you stay on to support our small businesses and learn about what they are offering so that their businesses can thrive, survive, and also be invested in. Have a blessed MLK Day. Continue the great work.
Hello, we want to take a moment to highlight some of the local businesses in and around the Bay Area. So first we have United Christian Fellowship in the Silicon Valley. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization.
Well, greetings to the African American Community Service Agency, to our family, friends, community, sorors, all of you out there. I am Teresa Williams, the First Lady of United Christian Fellowship. My husband is Pastor Ken Williams. United Christian Fellowship is a ministry that meets people right where they're at. Our mission is to bring God's word to your world, wherever your world is. We actually started as a Bible study and moved to a Saturday night service and finally to a regular Sunday service. But we have always been an online ministry because we want to be available to those near and far, as well as those who may not be able to get to a traditional Sunday morning service. So we have been broadcasting from the very beginning. Well, the pandemic really boosted us into the next level, and we really encourage you all to tune in, to subscribe, and to be a part of us through our YouTube. Please subscribe, our Facebook, Instagram, and I will actually put those links in the chat. But what I really want to share with you about is what is coming up this weekend. And I believe you all have made it possible for me to share my screen. We are going to have UCF Family Game Night. It's a free family game night. If you see the QR code and you happen to be watching on the screen and have your phone, just shoot at that QR code so that you can get registered for this Friday night. We're going to do Name That Tune. So you better brush up on all of your tunes, the 70s, 80s. We are going to have a bingo game as well as a scavenger hunt. So go ahead and take that. I will stop sharing and I will also put the link in the chat. That's United Christian Fellowship, where God's word meets your world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing about your organization. Up next, we have Bling Auntie. Go ahead and come off mute and share a little bit about your business, please.
Good afternoon. Congratulations on the 42nd annual MLK Luncheon. I'm so inspired. And what I have quickly for you today is fabulous $5 fashion jewelry. You can follow me wherever you are on social media here at Bling Auntie or on my e-commerce website at blingauntie.com. We have a special for the attendees of this fabulous and historic luncheon. If you use the code MLK free on orders for $25 or more, you get a free necklace, which is the Spotlight Stunner, the new blockbuster for this year. Also, we have opportunities available if you're interested in starting your own small business or encouraging your loved ones, your college kids, your retirees, you're looking for that side hustle. Bling Auntie and Paparazzi Accessories has a fabulous program to help you succeed right out of the gate. Yes, I do. Just contact me on any of these platforms. Lastly, I want to thank everybody for your support in the Tonga relief effort. So all of my profits for the rest of the month of January will go to the Tongan Relief Fund for the victims of the tsunami from the Tonga earthquake yesterday, day before, and the day before that. So I really want to thank everybody. I'm in Eastside San Jose proud, and I thank you all for your support.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here with us today. And definitely, if you're able to support, go ahead and check her website out. Up next, we have Unlimited Fashions. Go ahead and unmute yourself, share your name and a little bit about your business.
Okay, hi, I'm Samantha Wall-Layler, and my company is Unlimited Fashions. We specialize in beautiful ladies' clothing and accessories. We're on Facebook. On Facebook, you can see a lot of my Facebook Live videos. It is Samantha Wall-Layler, Wall, just like a brick wall, and Layler, Laidler. My company is Unlimited Fashions. We have beautiful fashion and accessories. And also we have a Women's Expo coming up on April 30th. It is going to be in Sacramento at the Crown Plaza. We also specialize in fashion show fundraisers for for-profit groups and also nonprofit groups. We also have a real estate investment club to help more African Americans do investment in real estate in California to make real estate a little bit more reachable for African Americans. And we also do wardrobe consultant. We also are stylists. We've done movies. We're on set. We actually style people that are going to be part of movies. So we are Unlimited Fashions. You can call me at 916-410-1664. Text me your email and I'll send you a catalog. And I'll also let you know about our upcoming events. And also we do personal shopping. A lot of people do not want to go out to malls and shopping centers. we can do personal shopping. And again, we specialize in fashion shows. My phone number again is 916-410-1664. And also we will be at the upcoming Harambe event, which is sponsored by Delta Sigma Theta in San Jose. So please check out on Facebook, Samantha Wall Layler. You'll see a lot of our fashions. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you. And just again, I dropped the link for our vendors. If you would like to go ahead and go to our vendors page for our MLK Luncheon, just click that link and you'll be able to see all the vendors that we have present today. And up next, we will have State Farm Insurance.
Thank you. I'm back again, just with a different background. I am Teresa Williams, your Good Neighbor State Farm agent. My husband is Pastor Ken Williams, and he's your Good Neighbor State Farm agent as well. We have 2 offices to serve you, one in Santa Clara and one in Morgan Hill. And I will drop that information in, well, I think she already dropped it in the chat. But what I want to tell you about is that we are going to provide free insurance and financial reviews for anyone who texts our number between now and the end of the week. We will schedule for you to have a free insurance and financial review, a 30-minute review. And as you know, I just came off of talking to you about UCF. I want to share with you a scripture, and that's 1 Timothy 5:8. And it says, but if anyone does not provide for their own, and especially those of their household, and I'll say community, they have denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. I believe that we have to take care of ourselves, our community. We have to provide for not only our children, but our children's children. And the best way to do that is to protect yourself and to be educated and informed. So check the chat. You'll see the text number. Text that number, your name and email, and we'll make sure that you get a 30-minute free insurance and financial review. Thank you all. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome. Good seeing you.
You too.
And next we will have Dotu, who will be sharing a video of Peninsula View. So go ahead, Dotu, whenever you're ready.
But I want to start off with saying this one thing, is that I am so happy that we finally, after years and years and years and years and years and years and years, we got a national holiday for Juneteenth. Even though we've been celebrating as long as I can remember somewhere, the holiday is now in place. And so we're, thank you, President Biden and Vice President Kamala. That's a great feat. We can be proud of. So the reason I'm having this conversation is that having arrived at being a senior, one of the things I noticed was the conversation that people are about seniors, that you step into it, you become a certain age, and there are people acting as if they're very nice, very kind, polite, but can you do this? Do you need this? And you're out of the conversation. And it's a conversation that has gone on for generations and generations with my mother, my aunts, and I can see it now. I didn't see it then. But the purpose of this, me starting a show like this, is to cause an explosion into that conversation as to who we are as seniors and what we can provide for those of you in the audience who are going to be lucky enough to become seniors. In what ways have you noticed a change in which people really react to you. We're, you know, in conversation with your family, your friends, especially health professionals and groups of people where you're kind of left out as to having anything to offer to the situation and treat you in a way that you didn't get treated when you were in your 40s in the conversation. Like you were pulled into the conversation or included. Right now, you just have to inject yourself. That's what I've noticed into whatever conversation is going on.
What happens is sometimes they'll act like I need help physically. I'm so old in my day, and the conversation, sometimes they talk and they just leave me out because they're sure I don't know what they mean.
It's like, in what ways have you noticed a change in the way people react to you? You know, like ways in conversation with your family, your friends, the healthcare professionals and groups. There is something that happens. We step into always listening of who people are. We don't even realize it until we notice the difference in the conversation. And then we ask ourselves, what is going on here? It's not the same as when we were leading meetings and doing this and doing that. It's totally different for me anyway. So I was wondering if that's for you. And
well, basically what I do is I just inject myself in the conversation, period. Yeah. I don't let younger people think they can control what I have to say. And, all right. And so my even in my family, the young people will stop and listen. When I start talking, everybody stops and listens, because they know I'm going to talk anyway, and that I know what I'm talking about. So I don't sit around and let them just try to control the conversation.
You just said something very important, that they know that when you're talking, they can't interrupt you because you're going to talk anyway. So that's something you have provided them to know that you have something to say. As before, like when you were in a meeting around other people, you didn't have to do that.
That's correct.
Let's give a round of applause to our vendors committee for the vendors that was able to submit their not only their hopes and their dreams to support their businesses, but as we know what's going on in the world. So make sure that you scroll in the chat to make sure that you support all of the small businesses that joined today. You can also find these small businesses on the MLK Luncheon website or on social media with AACSA. Listen, everyone, we are elated and excited about the dream. We are excited about the future of our community because we know that we, not I, but we can do this together. Have a blessed and a wonderful Dr. King holiday. Make sure that you reach out to your nonprofit organizations, if it is not AACSA, to volunteer, to donate, and to advocate for the rights of those who seek your support. Be blessed, be well, happy 2022, and let's get to work.
Thank you.